Catalyst, a person or thing that precipitates an event and triggers a vast increase in the rate of progress. Over the last 10 years, Spokane, Washington, and the Inland Empire have experienced a rate of growth that has never occurred in the past. As a native growing up in a family of developers, I have always been intrigued by our city and the people who are responsible for our growth. Up until now, there has never been a voice of progress and development. Catalyst. This is the place where you will meet all the players responsible for the growth and development of our beautiful cities and this region. This is not just another local podcast. This is the Catalyst. And I'm your host, Bruce Van Cott. Hey Spokane, this is Bruce Van Cott. I'm your host. We've got the Catalyst podcast here, episode 7. I'm joined by former House Representative Kevin Parker. He's also the owner of Dutch Bros Coffee here in Spokane and Coeur d'Alene as well.
Just Spokane.
Just Spokane. Okay. And you also have Embrace Washington. And I imagine a whole other list of things that I'm missing, right?
Now, started Embrace about, it's almost 10 years now.
Yeah.
It started that.
That's been a wonderful charity, a wonderful institution. We got to do some stuff. Tell us a little bit about Embrace. That's you're working with foster children, right?
Yes, Embrace was started when I met a foster youth named Josie who had just aged out of the system and was telling me stories about what it's like to be a foster youth, and just realizing there are some gaps there that we could fill. And that idea is what started Embrace Washington. And so one of the main narrative, and the reason that I started it, was we wanted to flip the narrative and say, well, instead of having a decreasing population of foster parents, but an increasing population of foster youth, what would it look like to flip that narrative? One, where there is a decreasing population of foster youth, but an increasing population of foster parents. So that's what we work on primarily.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad to have you on the podcast today. We got
Bruce.
a ton of stuff to cover.
Okay.
This is fun.
I'll hang on and enjoy the ride.
Wonderful. So let's start off. Give us a little bit of background, because you have done so many wonderful things, for Spokane, the city of Spokane. You've got the businesses, you're providing jobs. Give us a little bit of background how you got started, in business. I know it starts way before Dutch Bros. So
yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the history.
Business and entrepreneurship is always difficult, right? As you know, the road's almost always bumpy in the beginning, and it was certainly bumpy for us. My very first business was in Bend, Oregon. It was a little financial services business that did insurance products, things of that nature, retirement planning, those kind of avenues. And then was investing in real estate, not as a realtor, but investing in property down there. And that was right before Lehman fell. So it would have been 05, 06, 07 type time frame. And then we came up here, 02, 03, 04, 05 time frame. And then we moved up here and started Dutch Bros in May of 2005. And it was a hard ride in the beginning. We almost lost it all. The first shop started off very, very slow. And I remember many of nights thinking we weren't going to make it. And it was this long, dark tunnel. I was hoping there was the light at the other end wasn't a train, but it was sunlight. And you don't know in entrepreneurship, right? And then we opened up a second location, which was Monroe and Francis. And that started to stabilize a little bit of the losses from downtown, but we were still losing money every day. And then we opened up a third, which is the one by Gonzaga. And at that point, I thought there's a good chance we're going to make it, but not totally sure. So we opened up yet another one, and that was the one on Freya. And then when Freya opened, I knew at that point we would at least make it. To what degree, I didn't know, but I knew that we would make it at least to some level. But it's a hard road. Yeah,
absolutely. So for the audience, tell them a little bit about Dutch Bros. It's a franchise, correct?
It's a franchise.
So what made you decide to go down the road of working with a franchise rather than using your own branding, and specifically with coffee too? Was it you didn't have a background in coffee, I assume? And,
only as a consumer.
Okay, so did it jump out as you? Was it kind of coffee was the thing? Was it the franchise that was the thing that interested you, or the whole package?
It's a good question. I wasn't very familiar with Dutch Bros at the time. I knew of them, and I knew they were a pretty amazing company. In Bend, everything was going great. We had just built a home. We had great community, loved the town, and I never had no intention of leaving. And then my former business partner had asked me if I would partner with him and open up Dutch Bros in Spokane. And I had said no the first couple of times. The reason I said yes was because I think it was something bigger and harder and broader and deeper than anything a guy like me would ever have a chance to do. And so I said yes to it. And it was very scary. I always think of Jim Collins' book in Good to Great. And I was like, the thesis of that book is that you have to sacrifice the good on the altar of the great to have the chance at the great. And we had to sacrifice everything. And we almost lost everything, which is, I think every entrepreneur has a similar story that I do, that you start thinking on, okay, we need to pick up a second job to make sure we can make payroll. Employees are always paid first. And in the early days, there were a lot of times where employees were making more money than we were.
Yeah, I think that's probably part of any successful business when you're getting started. At least it's very common. So sure. That's a great point, though, when you're talking about not, being scared and jumping into that, and you had a really good lifestyle going on, and now you're taking this huge step and jumping out into the abyss. So yeah. Tell me a little bit about, the mindset and what it takes to, be able to, be successful going through those ups and downs and everything it takes to, deal with the unknown.
Yeah. I would say most entrepreneurs I know and many CEOs are some of the most giving people in our city. Your opening is largely the result of the business community doing a lot of work. And think about the importance of the business community. We fund nonprofits. There's not a college in this region that is not heavily supported by the business community. Sure. And so everything from issues of hunger, poverty, human trafficking. It's business. The business community has a lot of responsibility because we're the ones that can pull the lever and help fund these organizations. And I think many entrepreneurs feel like that. And they get in to make a contribution. And I think with entrepreneurship, it's about playing the long game, not the short game. The short game is very suffering and very hard. Only 9% of the population are entrepreneurs, where 100 years ago, it was about 90%.
Wow.
And so we're seeing that flip quite a bit. But it's a game where you say, it's a chance for me to make a legacy. It's a chance for me to make a contribution. It's a chance for me to make a difference. And I think that's why I went into entrepreneurship. And from most of the entrepreneurs I know, they would say the same thing.
So going back to that, I think that's definitely a good purpose and a reason why people get into it.
Yeah.
But just being able to make that decision. You're in Bend, Oregon. You've got your family,
right,
that relies on you. You got a steady career. You're doing well. To go risk all that.
Yeah.
What does it take to, make that decision? Just balls? What is it?
I think I think courage is a factor.
Sure.
I think you're playing the stats of probability. I think it's a passion. If it's a passion, it is. But going back to Good to Great just for a second, there's that magical trio in there where Jim Collins would say, anytime a business is entertaining something, it should fall into these three categories. Can you be one of the best at it? Can it pay the bills? And are you passionate? And for me, Dutch Bros checked all those circles back then. In the current job I was in, I liked, but I wasn't overly passionate about it. And I knew it would provide a nice living, but I didn't want to do it for 20 or 30 years. I wanted to really have a lot of employees. And that was always something that was really deep on my heart. And I knew that if I grew my current business, which was called Parker and Associates, I could maybe grow it to 3, 4, 5, 10 employees at most. But I knew compared to doing Dutch Bros, it wouldn't compare. And so the thing that really helped make the decision was, if we sacrifice the good on the altar of the great, it could be really amazing. It might not, but it's going to be an amazing story. And the volume of employees. But in those early days, I remember Carrie and I were in our kitchen one night, and that's when the entrepreneurial story where the couple's in tears, wondering if they're going to, have enough food and go on. And Carrie, I remember asking, well, maybe we should just tell HQ we're going to give the keys back and go back to Bend. And I remember there was something about that question where I thought, we didn't come here to play 12 holes of golf. We came to play all 18. And so we still have more holes to play. And then we'll leave the course after the 18th. But this is not the 18th hole. And that's kind of what precipitated our second store.
That's powerful. So you've got the motivation now. So tell me a little bit about the due diligence that you did up front. You said you didn't know anything about the business starting off. what did it take to, familiarize yourself and, get some confidence from that, I assume?
Yeah, a lot of study on coffee. And as I really looked at the product itself, I was pretty amazed by it. And I was amazed by what a high quality product it is. It's a 3-bean medium roast using only first rate beans. And I don't know a lot of people that can say that. I've never heard anyone be able to say that, actually. We were in Hawaii a few years ago, Kauai, and we were touring the Kona coffee plantation.
Oh.
And the lady I wasn't wearing a Dutch Bro shirt or anything like that, but she was talking about how they have the best coffee in the world. And she explained why. And then she said, but there's someone who has the second best coffee in the world that I would say is very close to ours. And she'd say it's Dutch Bros coffee. And she asked if anyone had heard of it in the little tour group that we were touring. And I don't remember raising my hand or anything. I just wanted to experience the moment. And she said, they are the only other company we know in the world that only uses first rate beans. And they had partnerships with other coffee shops that they withdrew because they only want to work with people who do first rate beans. And they only wanted to be able to supply first rate beans. And that was very important to them because there's always first, second, and third rate, and second and third rate are often sold to other shops. But the first rate means you get the primo bean, and it's very hard and very expensive.
So you've got a great product. You've done your due diligence. You're motivated. You get
now
in
the business.
Now the business. Yeah. So now you're in there. You're working the day to day. So I know, and we've talked about this before. And one thing that Dutch Bros is known for is their employee training and how they treat the employees there. And I know that's a huge piece of what's made you successful. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, I made a lot of mistakes in the beginning. I treated customers different than I treated employees. I think in the early days, I was more engaged with customers than I was employees. And I assumed that's the way that it was supposed to work. And then I remember there was one day where I had an employee. I was working with her. It was an early morning rush. And we were both working the machine, and I turned around to grab a thing of milk, and when I turned back around, I bumped into her, and she paused right there, and we have cars on both sides of the stand downtown, and she said, well, Kevin, why do you care about the customers more than you care about us? And I remember being struck by the question, and I remember thinking, wow, who are you to ask me this question? This is the first thing I thought. And then I was really mad at her. And then I realized it was really quite a profound question. And I really wrestled with it for days and weeks. And it really caused me to do a lot of soul searching. And I thought, you know what? I wonder if she's the only one that thinks that. And I thought, probably not. I bet everybody thinks that. And then I started to ask, what are my priorities and why would that be true? And then what should be true? And so what I did was we started to change everything. And I developed the theory. I think other people have already developed it, but I realized that healthy organizations start from the core, start from the inside, and then they reach each layer. And so what we call customer service is nothing more than the external manifestation of the internal reality. That's customer service, right? It means that what's going on internally is so vibrant and dynamic that the customers can't help but feel it. And I think where organizations, whether business or private or nonprofit or educational, they all fall into that same paradigm, which is, are they going to be consistent and are they going to treat everyone the same? And if you do, then it all starts internally. And so we started the Servant Leadership Institute. We've done a lot of financial training with our staff. That's probably the most popular class we offer. We offer multiple classes and it fills up right away. And only 7 or 8 people get in it to keep the intimacy of it. And it really changed the way that I treated employees and looked at the business. And so I'm a big believer the internal impacts the external.
Absolutely. Well, and it's shown that you've had employees go on to open their own stores. I mean, everybody talks about, Dutch Bros. You think of maybe working at a coffee place as an entry-level job, but people make wonderful careers working with you guys. And there's tons of forward mobility.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about, employees that have gone on and opened up stores and what that, what that feels like, what that's like for you guys.
Yeah, that's a good question. One of our employees opened up a coffee shop in the Valley, and we were super supportive and excited for her to do that. And I even passed on a location that would have been a great location because it would have been too close to her business, and I was worried if it would impact her. And now I realize it probably helps the businesses around us, not hurt us. And in the early days, I thought it might hurt them. And so we have passed on multiple locations because it would hurt a local coffee shop. And And we've had in the finance class, we had a barista that came in, and she was, if I remember the numbers right, she was spending about $600 a month at Nordstrom as a manager of a coffee shop. So she would have been
Wow.
making about $40,000 a year and spending $600 to $1,000 a month at Nordstrom's.
Oh my
And
gosh.
she went through the class, and that started to change. And she is now a financial advisor. And she wanted to be an accountant for a while. Then she realized, no, I want to advise people so they don't get in this mess. And she turned her finances right around. We have a couple employees that would say they own homes today because of the financial classes we teach inside. And so that's really exciting. Then we have a barista going to Harvard in the fall that he's really excited about. And it was one of the easier recommendations I've ever written. Was excited about that one. And so our crews have gone on to so many different things, from med school to open their own businesses to law school, and they've done it all.
That's amazing. And you don't see a lot of businesses putting that type of effort or resources, into their employees. Two-part question. Why do you think that is? And then also, is it something is it really hard to do? Is it something that, it sounds like it pays off 100%, right?
I think it does. I think we do see it a lot. We have a lot of models around town that do a really good job of that. I think Washington Trust is a model. I think
Sure.
Northwest Farm Credit is an amazing model. What they do for their employees, they've got a workout gym on their campus. They've got everything is just first class, and they do lots of classes, and they do an incredible leadership conference where they bring in pretty amazing speakers. Canopy Credit Union does a great job of that. There's a lot of models around that do a really good job of investing in people. And I think there's a difference, because we all know the term servant leader, and that was started by Robert Greenleaf in 1977, although he coined it, but it was really started by Dr. King, Mother Teresa. They were practicing those philosophies and talking about them way before that. In fact, Dr. King was using the term servant leadership in his church in Ebenezer Church, and that model is a development program. It's not about being nice. It's not about being courteous. Yeah, you should do those because you're a human. There's a 4-prong approach that the servant leadership model follows, and it all starts internal. Do employees become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous? That's the benchmark of employees. Hence, are they better off after being with us than before being with us? And I think there are companies that do that. I think it's hard to do it. It's expensive. It's inconvenient. You don't know what your ROI is, but you know that lives are being changed to some degree. And over the years, you get to see it over a broad spectrum, and that's pretty cool.
Absolutely. And I think that's a huge deal right now. Especially for our listeners, all the business owners out there.
Yes.
There's been this huge, it's almost a political conversation on, with the stimulus checks and people working, not working, being on unemployment, employers not being able to find people to work for them. And really this whole conversation of employers maybe not treating employees the way that they deserve or the way that they should. So I know that you get to travel and speak a lot to some of these companies. Are you talking to them about this? And is it something that you think makes them more competitive in the market right now?
Interesting question. A lot of the companies I speak to are doing this already.
Wow.
I always think that some of that's a Hollywood narrative. I think employers typically start because they love people. Not that there's not bad apples out there. Of course,
Sure.
There are a few bad apples. No more than any other industry, whether it's politics or education or law or construction or you name it, right? The bad apples in the industries are probably about the same percentage. But I think overall, maybe it's a Spokane thing, but I feel like our business leaders in Spokane have such a deep love and passion for the people that they serve. And I think that shows in the growth of the city. And then out of state, when I do travel a little bit, those are the companies that I think tend to invite me. I've not really been invited to a company where I feel that they are so off the mark. I feel like the companies that are invited me have the same philosophies.
Yeah.
So I think overall employers do a pretty good job, and they want to do a good job of leading and building into people.
That's nice to hear. And I think I noticed that here in Spokane as well, but it's nice to hear that you're, seeing that, all throughout your travels.
Yeah.
So we talked about Dutch Bros. We've talked about the foundation. You've got that built now. Let's talk about some of the struggles and maybe going back to opening that second store.
Yeah.
And really, taking that jump into scaling the business.
Yeah. The excuse me. It was a really hard decision to open up the second store because we were so struggling on the first, and we were very close to not opening the second store. And I had gone to pretty much every business leader I knew of in Spokane, which wasn't very many, asking for advice on how do I run this business? How do I make sure it doesn't go bankrupt? How do I move forward with it? And one of the things that I realized is there is no silver bullet. There's no panacea. The closest thing to a panacea would be how we treat our employees. And if we want our customers treated like princes and princesses, we have to treat our employees like kings and queens. And so that's the closest thing to a panacea, on a side note. But as I asked so many different people and realizing there was no one answer, I got an article sent to me by a guy I had known in Bend. And I had not talked with him since I moved. I was never particularly close with him, but he sent me an article on Subway. And how Subway's first shop was really struggling. And when Subway opened up their second shop, they started to do a lot better. And for some reason, that cued me on, of course, we have to do a second shop. And I always have the visual and the metaphorical picture that we're sitting around the poker table and I've got to push all the chips in order to stay in the game. And that's what it was like opening up the second stand, because at the first stand, we still had reserves. We could have pulled the plug and moved back to Bend. Now it was not anymore. All the chips are on this table, and it's going to take a lot to keep this going. And again, a lot of franchisees and any sort of company, a lot of business owners have very similar stories.
Well, unfortunately, we know how the story ends, but tell us a little bit about the process. I mean, you opened the store, and what did it, what were those things that helped you become successful? Did it happen right away?
Yeah. I think it was consistency.
Okay.
We stayed open late at night when most people in our industry did not. I think that gave us a competitive advantage for market share that we still appreciate today. I think when we started focusing on employees, I think people were happier. I was happier. I remember feeling under immense stress those first couple of years. And anyone who's owned a business knows exactly what I'm talking about. But those nights where you don't sleep very well and where it just feels like you're never going to make it. And you almost feel like on the fringe of society because you know that you could be cast aside with a few bad days of weather or anything like that. Every holiday
Absolutely.
really impacted us hugely, and we felt it financially because every day was so important. But I think the mindset was really focused on, okay, we're playing the long game here. What's the long game? The long game is multiple stands and lots of employees and really making a difference in our city. And so we tried to stay focused on that. But that's not to diminish the stress and the fear and the uncertainty that we felt and impacted the way I operated too. I think I could hide it when I was with a customer. I don't think I always hide it. I always hid it well with my crew. And I think if you talked, we started with 7 employees. We now have about 250. We might have had 9. I don't remember if it was 7 or 9, but we had 7 to 9 employees. 7 to 9, 250 now. I think my stress, the early employees would have felt that. And it is moving a mountain is similar to starting a business. And so anyone who starts a business in any industry, kudos to them because it's not easy to do. And we need more and more people doing it because that's, by the way, how jobs are created. Business owners create jobs. It's a simple mathematical equation.
Absolutely. And I think you're a perfect example of it too when we talk about, what you are doing for your employees, because I think that education piece is wonderful, and it would just be really nice, I think, if there was, more of a light shown on that, because business owners, entrepreneurs do get kind of a bad rap at times. I think. And, but there's so many amazing things that some of your employees have gone on to do. And that's what it's all about. It sounds like.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it is the care that we give to them, and again, this is my story, but I don't think it's different from anyone else's.
Sure.
They, like I've bought breaks for employees. We've given employees vacations. We've we've paid rent for them. You know, most employers have those exact stories, and those are the things that entrepreneurs and CEOs do behind the scenes that they don't really talk about a whole lot for a lot of different reasons. But there's a stewardship that we have with the people that work for us, and that means there's a difference of realizing that an employee works for you, and that person that works for you is a person. And when we speak to that person as a person, and we look at that person as a mother, a father, a daughter, a son, a spouse of someone else, a partner, we say, you've got value. And while you're under my stewardship, I'm going to do everything I can so that you're growing and excelling as an individual. And I hope that the next thing you do is a reflection of this, that this was a springboard that bounces you into into your next passion.
What do you see for what challenges are you guys facing now, and what are kind of the goals that you guys have now? Because now, how many stores do you guys have?
We have 10 right now.
10 stores. Wow. So yeah, right now, totally different company from, 2 stores, I can imagine. So what challenges are you guys dealing with now?
It's interesting. I think we have a new generational, Gen Z versus millennials.
Sure.
And that's really fun. But as you talk about what are the challenges, I think we have lots of different generations that will be populating our coffee stands in our company as a whole. We just don't have our coffee stands, but we have an HR director, we've got regional managers, we've got positions like that as well that are at our warehouse. But overall, it's keeping up with the generations and realizing that every generation has things different. Like Generation Z, very different from millennials. Generation Z, research will show, will make their decision in the first 10 minutes, and that's very conservative. Some research says in the first 4 minutes, if they will stay with a company long term. And long term, unlike millennials who, generically speaking, didn't necessarily commit to one company, they would say, we'll take new opportunities as they surface. Gen Z will commit to one company for 4, 10, or 15 years if they believe it's a place they can grow personally and professionally.
Wow. So
for companies that are not investing in employee development, I would argue Gen Z is going to force your hand on that to do a better job of that. So I think one of the challenges is always the generation. Technology can either be your friend or foe, and when we treat it like our friend, it can take the business to new heights. And so there's challenges. I'm not aware of challenges yet, but they're coming.
Sure. So what do you see for the future of Dutch Bros going forward, at least here in Spokane?
Yeah. Hopefully a lot more mochas going out the door.
Absolutely. It's a good mocha.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
I'm an Americano guy.
I know you're a straight black guy.
Yeah.
We do a lot of I don't know. It'll be interesting. We'll do more shops. We've got a new one coming that's cool that we haven't yet announced, so you're kind of the first one to kind of hear about it. And then, our model's probably going to evolve and change to some degree. In some degree, it'll stay exactly the same. But, Spokane grows and the population grows. That benefits most people in our society. So for us, it'll be inventing new drinks. It'll be keep making a difference in the community. And, we do 4 give backs a year where we give to individuals and we give to organizations, where we give an entire day's profit. And,
wow.
In August, August or September, we'll be doing Christmas Wish, Buck for Kids, with 92.9, Dave Kinamali and all that. So I think one of our challenges, frankly, is how do we keep up with the needs? How do we set employees up for success? Help develop them financially so they can buy homes and things like that, prepare them for their careers, get them through college, making new drinks. There's all sorts of challenges. That's part of what makes business fun too.
Absolutely. You kind of have the freedom to do what you want to do.
Yeah.
And so, talking about that, I mean, starting off, I'm sure it was much different, but what's kind of your day-to-day now is it CEO or president, or what is your official title at Dutch Bros?
Oh, it depends. It's probably in Spokane. It's
senior
barista.
CEO.
Yeah. It's probably CEO for
CEO.
Spokane. Yeah.
Okay.
That's how I'm mostly identified.
So what, tell me about the day-to-day, what you're doing, in the company. What's that kind of look like?
It's every day is a little bit different, which is fun. 2 days ago, I was on the phone late with an employee who was having a hard time making rent and had a roommate issue. And so that's part of what falls under us is how do we take care of our employees? today. Oh, we hired a new HR director about 2 weeks ago.
Congratulations on that, by the way.
So I've been taking them around to the different stands, and so we've been setting about 90 minutes a day to where I take them into a stand, and we usually bring treats for the crew and staff, and they get to meet Jackson and so forth, and that's cool that they get to meet him. And then on Wednesdays, I've got heavy employee development day. We've got a regional meeting where I meet with the regional managers, HR, about what's going on, what's on the agenda, what's going on in the company, what are some constraints we need to be aware of. And then we have a manager training that goes for an hour and a half after that, and lunch. And so those are Wednesdays. So every day is vastly different. I'm still involved in the community quite a bit. So every now and then I might have a golf tournament to play to support a charity, or something going on in the community, or an event to attend, or something like that.
So what's kind of the favorite part of your job? The best part?
Yeah, that's a good question. I love the strategy of it. I love helping people solve problems, because as this is a great training ground to help develop them solve problems. I think I like to see employees grow the most. That's really gratifying. Yeah. Like when you see them operating at a different level, and you see them invested, and you see them happy, and you see them growing and becoming more comfortable with who they are. That sort of thing is so fun. But so to answer your question, probably the maturity of the employees is just really, really fun.
Yeah, no, I think that's, once again, going back to why you're successful, because you're investing in them.
Yeah.
So with the local economy, I mean, the real estate economy is on fire right now. We've got people moving in here left and right. You talked about having a new store possibly. What do you see for the future of Spokane, the economy here? And what effect do you think that's going to have on small businesses like Dutch Bros?
A lot. It's interesting because during the pandemic, there's this narrative that the whole East Coast is moving and relocating to the West Coast.
Yeah.
But what I tell people is, how many license plates out of state have you seen recently? Not very many, actually.
Yeah. I
saw a California license plate the other day, and that was the first time I'd seen a California plate in probably a month or 2 or 3. The studies show that 85% of people during the pandemic are relocating within their own city. 95% of people during the pandemic who have been moving are relocating within their own state. Now, the 3 areas that are moving to Spokane are Seattle, Portland, and San Francisco. We know that we're drawing off those 3 more than any others. And notice the trend there. They're moving from big, dense, populated lifestyles to existences to a very good lifestyle in Spokane, with over 30 lakes, 4 good ski resorts, about 211 days of sun is what you get in Spokane.
And 10 Dutch Bros.
And 10 Dutch Bros. So good. Well played. And that's what they get in Spokane. And they get amazing people. So we are seeing people relocate here. We definitely have hit the map. You can see that Visit Spokane is doing advertisements in San Francisco now, in Portland and Seattle, because they're tapping into the people that are already moving here. So I think we're going to see more and more people move here. But what's really interesting in the overall economy is that since 1900, we've had about 22 different recessions. Each recession lasts on average about 11 months. And so recessions typically aren't as deep as we tend to feel that they are. They're actually over relatively soon. But psychologically, the American consumer, it impacts us a lot. And because people lose jobs, they have a hard time paying bills. They can be devastating effects. But so all that being said, the question for the economy is one that no economist can answer right now, which is, what's the future? We know that we're long overdue for a recession. To what degree and how much, we don't know. The real estate market will be interesting. Real estate has probably hit a new ceiling. I do foresee it softening at some point by late summer. I think as we see more inventory, the moratorium ending, right now there's 10 million Americans that are behind on their mortgage payment. And that's going to be a big factor when moratoriums end. With more inventory coming on, it'll be interesting what happens, but it does seem like the economy right now, it's still working on Band-Aids from the 2006 recession, 2007. So we have so many Band-Aids over the current wound. No economist really knows how deep or how severe that wound is, but we know there's a wound there that's been impacted through tools of quantitative easing, home ownership tools. There's a lot of stuff on that Band-Aid. So it makes it to get a clearer view of exactly where the economy sits is very, very difficult.
Well, and when you're talking about quantitative easing and some of the different things that I think people have some fears of with the economy, and in real estate, a lot of people are concerned about credit crunch or the market softening. In the coffee business, what effects do you project seeing with an economy, with a changing economy, or what are you guys planning for in the future?
We always plan. We do that mainly through retained cash earnings to make sure there's savings so that we can keep paying employees.
How important are retained cash earnings?
Scale of 1 to 10, a 12.
Yeah.
I would say every business owner in every business, it's so important to have retained cash earnings because it's how you pay your employees during recessions. And so you don't necessarily have to lay off, and you can make sure they can still eat and pay their rent or their mortgages, things of that nature. So I think that's one of the stewardships of being a business owner is how do you prepare for these moments so that you can still take care of your employees? So we are impacted. We see people change drinks a lot. We see them go from lattes to Americanos. We certainly see a decline. But it's also an affordable treat. And so we still see people coming by, and we're really honored to do that. And it's really, I was working the stand during the recession of 2006, 2007. And I remember thinking what an honor it is that anyone would choose to spend their couple bucks with us. And we have to make sure that product is perfect, because I don't know if that's their last $2 or $3 or $4. I don't know that it's not, but I don't know that it is. But I know that they're choosing to spend it during a recession. And I know that finances were limited. And I remember making those drinks and wanting them to be so perfect for that person because I didn't know how much of a sacrifice that was.
Yeah. That's a great outlook to have when you're, putting that together. I mean, it's a nice thing to have people coming through the stand, even in the recession. Is that something you think you can count on as far as, you look at things like alcohol, for instance? You usually see sales of alcohol go up. How does coffee do in a recession?
Coffee remains relatively stable. And
Does it?
if you go back to Russia, even in the 1700s, when the country was really, really struggling, you'll see that the two things that did relatively well, or at least stayed afloat, were bakery shops and coffee shops.
Really?
Yeah. And I think in America, it's similar in that we can stay afloat. It's still there. It still hurts us, as it does every business. But during recessions, my thought is, okay, how do we make sure that our people are taken care of? And that's what retained cash earnings help do. Because if you close the doors, a lot of jobs are lost. And then what is easy not to be mindful of is, if we have to lay people off during recessions, that means they may not be able to pay their rent, their mortgage, if they have car payments, things of that nature. Food becomes hard. And so there's the hardest thing about entrepreneurship, which you asked earlier, one of the challenges, it's you carry a lot on your shoulders, because you know that people pay their bills based on how you perform as a company.
Absolutely. So, and we've talked a little bit about Embrace. We've talked about Dutch Bros. Yeah. I know we didn't even talk about the fact that you're a professor at Whitworth.
Yeah.
And you've got a lot going on with that. I want to get into that a little bit, but how do you keep up with all of it?
I wake up every morning at it depends on the season, between 4:30 and 5.
Sure.
On the weekends, I'll sleep in until about 5:30 or 6. I'm pretty adamant about getting 7 hours sleep a night. It's hard to get 8, but I can tell I operate better at 6.
You've got it dialed in.
At 7. Yeah, I've been playing with my sleep for years, trying to dial that in. I've got a pretty intense morning routine, and I just know that I just try and enjoy every day. And I believe gratitude's a big part of that. I think we all have challenges. We all have good moments. We all have bad moments or hard moments. And I think gratitude is one of those things that academic research will show really helps an individual perform at a high level. But teaching's always been a side hobby for me in terms of it's energizing, it's fun, it keeps me sharp. It's in alignment with what I do with Dutch Bros because the material I use with MBA students, which I've been using now for 10 or 11 years, directly translate into the own walls of my company and vice versa.
So going back to teaching then, talk to me a little bit about the value of education, because there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that have been extremely successful not going to college at all. Right. I mean, then you see, people that go the complete opposite direction.
Yeah.
you've got Dutch Bros, you're teaching on the side. You're actually working is it your PhD dissertation? Yeah. So talk to me about what role education's played in, the success of your businesses and just in, the larger success of your life.
Yeah, I think the role of education, I think, is changing. It's an interesting question. I don't know if education is going to look the same 5 or 10 years from now than it does today. I think we're going to see more executive education. I think we're going to see more use for certificates. I think we're finding, I was talking with a recruiter at Amazon, and they say they're very interested in the certificates people have in addition to the degrees. I think statistically in America, we've had a lot more people going to college than our economy has really said that it's needed. So that's one of those interesting statistics. I think education is largely about developing critical thinking, relationships, and your self-efficacy. I think that's why people go and get degrees. But I do think education is going to look vastly different in the next several years. I suspect it will.
Talk to me about what you're teaching in some of your MBA classes and really maybe how you've seen that translate to success out in the field, rather than just theoretically.
One of the classes I teach is entrepreneurship. I take a group of students to Sun Valley twice a year, first part of December, first part of January, and they meet some amazing entrepreneurs down there that have just done. Sun Valley is a buffet of some pretty amazing entrepreneurs who've chosen to retire there or they move their businesses. Oakley sunglasses, and there's a lot of businesses, brand name businesses that came out of Ketchum, Idaho than people realize. And so you can be sitting at a bar one night and you're sitting next to a gold medalist or Clint Eastwood or Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, you just never know who's going to be in restaurants and bars around there. And so students get exposed to this. And so they get to meet some pretty amazing CEOs and entrepreneurs. And I would say the financial component, as I do at Dutch Bros, I also do at Whitworth. And I just had a student text me who in the entrepreneurship, 3 out of 4 businesses in America fail. And that stays true for pretty much any state in the union. When we realize why those businesses fail, more often than not, the research shows it's undercapitalization.
Sure.
And so in the entrepreneurship class I teach a financial component because their personal finances are going to be related to their business ventures. And if they want to stay afloat, they have to live below their means and live frugally. They can't live lavishly. My understanding is as banks look at loans these days, they're also looking at the lifestyle of the entrepreneur because they're not interested in funding expensive Range Rovers and cars like that. They want to know, are there money going to car payments or is the money going to funding the business? And so banks have become more discerning over the last few years from what I'm hearing. But I just had a student, since he had texted me and he said and he listed the number of days. In fact, do you have time for me to read this?
Yes, please. Okay. I'm going to adjust this real quick.
This is a text, and it's not totally unusual. There's a couple texts I get and they're pretty special. And he says, Kevin, it's been exactly 158 days since we returned from Sun Valley. In that time, we have paid off $5,756 on a car loan. We've paid off $5,747 on another debt. He paid off $9,941 on a credit card. And he said, I just made my last payment today, triple exclamation points. He goes, in total, we have put $24K towards debt, summer clothes, and so forth. I wanted to say thank you. Our time in Sun Valley has forever changed my life. It's like that kind of stuff about what we can do with employees, what we can do with students in this case. It's like, what does it mean to give them tools that alters the trajectory of their life? That guy retired, $24,000 of debt, and he doesn't make very much money, by the way. I know how much he makes a year. He doesn't make very much, but he pulled in the belt and he did some of the Dave Ramsey techniques and tools and paid off a lot of debt in 158 days. And now he's debt-free and he's operating at a different level. And I think that's a gift that we can give our employees as well.
Yeah, that's amazing because that's definitely something you've got to do before you can start taking some of the risks to open a business. It's really intriguing to hear about the trip down to Sun Valley and just running into people like this. Tell me, what does it take? I mean, is there any sort of method to going out and networking or going to these places and kind of building a nice network of people that you can then use as mentors or resources in the future?
It's a good question. I think it's about relationship.
Sure.
I don't love the word networking personally. If you read Tony Hsieh's work, before he passed away, he talked a lot about the difference of building a relationship and building a network. And he would say relationships build networks. Networks don't necessarily build relationships. That's how I would that's how I would summarize his. That's not his language, but that's how I would summarize his work. I think when we build the relationships, we never know how those are going to benefit, but I don't think that's why we build relationships. I think we build relationships because we like that individual and we want to be of help. And that comes back to the whole gratitude thing. I would say that a lot of the people that I've got, Sun Valley is where I had my first investment properties actually. And so we've been involved in that community for about 18 years. And it's just, that's a small knit community. And so when you meet one or two or three people, if Kevin Bacon is 6 degrees of separation, in Sun Valley, it's 2 or 3 degrees. There's only 2,200 people that live there, maybe a little more now after the pandemic, but it's a small community. So it's easy to get to know people. And then I invite them into the class. And this year, one of the things that I was thinking on, like, what do I want part of the legacy of Spokane to be? And we have some amazing leaders that have gone ahead of us. Phil DePofi of Northwest Credit, Pete Stanton, Jack Heath, Harry Sladich, Julie Shiflett. There have been a lot, Scott Morris. There have been some amazing, amazing people that have done a lot in our community over the years. And, now that torch is starting to be passed to our generation, and it's up to our generation of entrepreneurs to continue the work that they toiled so hard to do. It'll be a lot easier for us than it was for them, but it's time we start stepping to the plate and looking at this city and saying, what do we want it to be and what do we want our contribution to be? And I was asking myself that question. One of the things I asked was, how do we create leaders that have the same philanthropic nature that all of them had with their companies and organizations? Because essentially they used their organizations to make a difference for the community, and they used it to better Spokane and better people's lives. And that's, if there's entrepreneurship defined in one sentence, it's creating something that betters the lives of people around you, both collectively and individually. And so I started the Institute of Leadership, and I ran it through Whitworth University. At first I thought about doing just a nonprofit, but then I thought I might get more legs if I connect to a university. So I ran it through Whitworth, and these are participants that they are not Whitworth students, by the way. It's geared towards people in the community that are mid-level professional that want to be in the C-suite or want to start their own businesses. And so we pursue high-performing individuals in the Spokane community, and we have a philanthropic approach to it. And so I said, what would it look like if we created the deepest, the broadest, the most deep, impactful leadership organization this region has ever had? And so that's what I set out to do. I said, so when I developed a board, I said, I want the people on the board that have built this city. So we have an amazing board of directors. We have Charlotte Nemec CEO of Canopy. We have Phil DePofi, CEO of Northwest Farm Credit, Letitia Hill out of Avista, Wayne Williams of Telect, Jack Heath of Washington Trust. And so I said, Julie Shiflett, one of the greatest financial minds in our area. And I say, what if I got all these people in the room and helped create this institute? And every single one of them said yes. In fact, I've never approached a board member who said no to joining the board. And so I said, you're being asked because you've got a lot of wounds from all your leadership. You've scraped your knees and elbows a lot of times over the last 30 years. We want to learn from those, and we want you to help us to create the future leaders of this city. And so our first class, it's an intensive cohort. We meet, we have 3 different intensives. The first one is actually in Sun Valley this fall. We're already full for 2021 school or 2021 class. So we're already working on next year. And we already have an applicant applied for not this year's class, but next year. So we go spend 3 days in Sun Valley, and they're going to meet some of these amazing entrepreneurs. And then I called one of my old professors from Harvard at the Kennedy School, who is also a moderator when I had him at the Aspen Institute, named Marty Linsky. And Marty is 80 now and just retired from Harvard. And I said, can I call you back into leadership education for a few more years? And so I told him what I was doing, and Marty's like, I'll do it. I'm in. And not only, him and Ron Heifetz are the patriarchs of the theory of adaptive leadership, which is used for a lot of high-level leaders around the world. Over the years, people have come to Harvard to take these executive education classes from Ron and Marty, and these are CEOs. These are national senators, presidents of countries who have been in their classrooms. And so what they did is really, really good. And so not only did Marty agree to be on the board, but he also agreed to do some teaching. And so people at Spokane are going to be taught from Marty Linsky, one of the most esteemed professors at Harvard, during this program as well. And so we just wanted to create something so big and so dynamic. And we've raised about $500,000 for it. And so we've been on the move during the pandemic, and we kick off in September. And then we meet in between, and they get to meet with one of the CEOs in our community that it's not just a networking event, but just the participants come for a dinner with the CEO, and we sit down or the entrepreneur, and they talk about life, kind of what you and I are doing. And it's just a dinner conversation for 2 or 3 hours. No more agenda than that. Share your story. And then we all get to build a relationship. And then from there, we go to, let's see, in January, I forget the dates, but we go to Scottsdale for 3 days and do the same thing there. And then we come home, we do a portrait of leadership here in Spokane. And then we go back to Sun River, Oregon for the last one. And then we're going to create an amazing alumni network where relationships are built. So to answer your question, 70 years ago, David McClellan out of Harvard did a study that's often quoted today that says you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. You'll see it pop up on Facebook every 2.5 years, like, religiously.
Absolutely.
And people think that's brand new information. That is 70 years old. And his research, if you read his research, it will say that who you spend time with is literally who you become. So do so with caution. Spend your time with people. And so as you ask, Bruce, like, how do you get around people that are at a different level, but you want to have more access to? You build relationships with them. You allow them to have a voice in your life, and you build an authentic relationship, not because you want anything from them, but because you want to learn from them and you want to also be a resource for them.
Absolutely. How does somebody get involved in the Leadership Institute?
They apply, or they're recommended by their CEO. So there's a whole website. They could hit me up on Facebook on a messenger, and I could put them in touch. But we have a whole admissions committee for it because cost is $8,400 a year, which is a lot of money. But if you compare it to what other leadership experiences are asking and what you get on this one, it's quite a good deal, actually.
Absolutely.
But, it's an amazing program. We designed it to change lives. Like, people always ask, like, what's the mission? And the mission is this: to change lives and equip people to lead at a very high capacity. That's what we do. And so they can hit me on Facebook and private messenger. They can go to Whitworth and find it on they could probably Google it, the Institute of Leadership at Whitworth, and it will pop up on their search engine pretty quickly.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's exciting. And you said that kicks off in September this year.
Yeah, we've already accepted all the applicants. And so all the applicants get their materials in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And then we all meet in Sun Valley in about 8 weeks.
That's really exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Well, cool. Well, I think that's a wonderful place for us to end off. We just hit about an hour. So
cool.
I know you got a baseball game to get to.
That's right.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
My little guy.
Yeah.
Little dude.
Yeah. What positions he play?
He plays second base and he pitches.
Oh, nice. That's exciting.
He's fun to watch.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on. This is great.
Thanks, Bruce. You do a great job, man. And I think you're an impressive individual. I think you're one of those people we're going to be talking about in the next 10 years.
Well, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Yeah. And that does it for episode 7 of the Catalyst podcast. Tune in. We'll be back here in a couple of weeks with another guest, and we'll see you guys soon.